Somalia New Deal. European Union pledged more funds to help rebuild Somalia. Rwanda's vote count underway as polls close. And on track, President Robert Mugabe set to open parliament despite opposition's call for a boycott. Welcome to Africa Live on CCTV News with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. Uncertainty is growing over the renewal of strategic U.S.-Africa trade law as the U.S. lawmakers negotiate a tough new budget.
Well, Nigeria is a very strong team, and when you take in our side, we are very young coming nations for World Cup qualifying and for AFCON.
And 180 minutes of play to separate the African boys from the men, 5 places up for grabs. Millions have spent the day voting for Rwanda's next parliament. Now, electoral officials say there has been a high turnout and no trouble. The election is expected to strengthen Paul Kagame's grip on power. CCTV's Jane Keo has the story from Kigali.
Rwanda's president has been in power for almost 2 decades, and Paul Kagame is confident with this vote.
Well, that's what you feel and hear from the Rwandans, and I think building on the track record of what the RPF has done for the country, there's no reason not to believe that RPF will win.
The Rwandan Patriotic Front has dominated here since Kagame's forces put an end to the genocide in 1994. Since then, Rwanda has been dramatically turned around. Voters are determined that recovery will continue.
The
importance of this vote is to strengthen our institutions and to boost the confidence of our leaders.
Rwanda as a country shows a lot because since the first one, it has been consistently done peacefully.
Some 6 million people are eligible to vote. They are choosing 80 new MPs. 53 are directly elected and 24 are reserved for women, the youth and handicapped. Monitors say there have been no problems.
People have been voting peacefully and there's no coercion.
Well, in many ways, the vote highlights how far this once ruined nation has come. But for some, it's also a test of Rwanda's democratic credentials. Almost 20 years on from the genocide, is Rwanda confident enough to accommodate differing views and differing voices?
Some critics, particularly opposition parties, have complained of harassment. But the president says Monday's vote clearly shows democracy in action.
For those who feel that if you dare oppose, your voice is still suppressed, what do you have to say about this?
Is this what you saw around in the voting? I mean, you have eyes, you use them to see what is happening, you get the answer.
Results are due by the end of the week. For many, the outcome is not in doubt. Jane Keo, CCTV, Kigali, Rwanda.
Well, let's now get more analysis on the Rwandan parliamentary voting exercise and how it went down. We're now joined live by CCTV's Jane Keo from Kigali. Jane, has the voting exercise come to an end, and how did it generally play out during the day?
Well, Beatrice, it has, and all seemed to have gone on well. We've not heard of any negative incidences, and even the election monitors we've spoken to have said that as much. They actually gave the exercise a thumbs up. The voters only seemed too eager to exercise their democratic right. Remember, this was the 3rd parliamentary election since the 1994 genocide came to an end, and it's quite a unique system, Beatrice. The voters were not directly voting for their members of parliament, but they were voting for parties which will then nominate individuals to represent them in the 80-member seat parliament. Now, tomorrow there's going to be more elections indirectly, of course, by women groups and local councils. They will be voting for the 24 women who will be sitting in parliament. Don't forget, in the last poll, the women dominated the parliament. 44 out of 80 seats were held by women. And then on Wednesday, there's going to be more elections for 3 youth and disabled representatives. Beatrice?
All right, Jane, President Paul Kagame's Rwandan Patriotic Front is expected to win convincingly in this election. How was the voter turnout? It was expected to be quite high.
It was, but it's hard to tell at the moment. And I have to say that we did not witness the overly long queues over crowded centers, partly because the 15,000 polling stations seemed to have been well organized to cater for this. In fact, the election monitors also mentioned this, because we had, even in some centers, some polling stations had as much as 20 to 10 polling centers. This was meant to deal with the overcrowding and the long queues. So people were just getting in, voting and going away. But I did speak to the Electoral Commission chairman, and he said that in the end he expects the outcome or the turnout to be more than 90%, which is not unusual considering this is Rwanda.
All right, CCTV's Jane Keo following the developments for us there from the Rwandan capital, Kigali. Thank you. Now, the European Union has pledged some 650 million euros to Somalia on Monday at a conference in Brussels. The international donors met in Brussels to approve a new deal for Somalia to help drive its political and economic recovery. Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud told delegates that he was grateful for all the efforts made on behalf of his country. And this comes amid a security crisis in Somalia, where the Al-Shabaab are fighting to oust Somalia's President Mohamud's government. Now, the group controls most of southern Somalia, but it has been driven out of the main cities and towns, including the capital Mogadishu, by the African Union force, which is backing the government. Let's now get more on that story, and we're joined live here in studio by Mr. Abdi Mohammed, a political analyst specializing in the Horn of Africa region. Welcome to Africa Live today. Well, what is the likely impact, though, of this latest pledge as Somalia gets going with its reconstruction progress?
Yeah, 650 million euros is huge in terms of the 5 sectors which EU wants to fund. One is in the political sector, security sector, and justice sector. If those funds are put into prudent use, because they will be available for the next 3 years, the impact is huge.
There have been, though, a number of international efforts to assist Somalia. This is not the first conference of its kind on Somalia. How have previous funds, though, that were pledged earlier on been used to date?
Oh, yes. On the humanitarian front, the funds have been used very, very, very well, because we have been seeing Somali refugees all over, even in our borders here in Kenya. And to a large extent, the Somalis who have been affected by famine and drought have benefited. But there have been numerous reports concerning the Somali government. I think they need to put up more efforts as far as corruption is concerned.
Well, that whole question of corruption, though, was also a big issue during the former transitional federal government's tenure. How is that being handled now during President Sheikh Mohamud's administration? Yeah,
Hassan Sheikh has been at the forefront, and I think he has the will and capacity because of a lean cabinet, highly educated, and not the normal warlords we used to know. This is a different cabinet, and I think they can do a lot as far as curbing corruption in Somalia is concerned. The future is bright as far as this team of Somalia today is concerned.
Well, the future is bright, but there is still a big question mark on the stability and security situation. What's the security situation at the moment?
You're right. There's a lot of optimism. Although Al-Shabaab is still there, the AMISOM has done a very good job. They are no longer in the big cities. They are in the outskirts. The security situation is not that good, but with these funds and some security sector reform and reconciliation in Somalia, Al-Shabaab can be beaten.
Is that hampering, though, in investor confidence?
Yes, it is. Investors are now adopting a wait-and-see attitude in Somalia. But I am sure in the next 1 year, things will be different in Somalia, and they will invest in Somalia, especially countries like Kenya, which are so close.
All right, Mr. Abdi Mohammed, political analyst specializing in the Horn of Africa region. Thank you very much for joining us here on Africa Live. We'll take a short break now on Africa Live, but coming up. On track, President Robert Mugabe set to open parliament despite the opposition's call for a boycott. Well, let's now head to Zimbabwe, where President Robert Mugabe is preparing to officially open parliament. But opposition members of parliament have vowed to stay away. CCTV's Farai Mwakutuya has more.
Tuesday's ceremony will open Zimbabwe's 8th parliament, but the first under the country's new constitution. It will be dominated by President Robert Mugabe's ZANU-PF party. It won a 2/3 majority, enough to amend the constitution if it chooses. There have been questions raised about whether there can be genuine debate. ZANU-PF insists, though, that parliament will not merely be a rubber stamp. The opposition movement for democratic change won just 49 seats in July's election. It continues to insist the poll was rigged and says it will boycott the opening as attending would legitimize that election. Farai Mwakutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, let's take a look at other stories making the headlines across the continent at this hour. Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto left for the Netherlands on Monday, where his case is expected to resume on Tuesday. Mr. Ruto is expected to be out of the country until the 4th of next month, unless an unexpected break is issued by the judges. Already 3 witnesses are at The Hague, and the first one is expected to begin the testimony against Ruto on Tuesday. Now, this comes amid reports that 4 more witnesses withdrew from the case against Mr. Ruto and media personality Joshua Arap Sang. And moving on, a Turkish company, Favori LLC, officially took over the management of the Mogadishu Aden Ade International Airport from the Dubai-based SKA on Sunday. Favori LLC paid $1.5 million to the Somali government as royalty fees for the airport contract on the 14th of January. Somalia's cabinet last month passed a motion authorizing a deal with Favori, a privately held Turkish company, but the handover, which went ahead despite opposition from a section of Somali legislators, took nearly 24 hours to complete. Somalia is positioning itself to trade with the international community after decades of armed conflict. Finally, Côte d'Ivoire's President Alassane Ouattara visited the Togolese capital Lomé on Sunday and called on Ivorian refugees living in Togo to return home. The president assured the refugees that Côte d'Ivoire was safe after suffering years of conflict. Some 5,600 Ivorian refugees live in Togo, including some 3,000 in the camp Avepozo, which is located 15 kilometers east of Lomé. The Ivorian head of state also addressed several topics, including bilateral relations between the 2 countries and the possibility of long-term financing of the economies of the West African Economic and Monetary Union. Relationships between Côte d'Ivoire and neighboring states have largely improved since President Ouattara came to power. Now, Palestinian Islamist movement Hamas has again denied any role in the militant attacks in Egypt. The Egyptian military says Hamas has been training jihadists to make bombs. The army says it has the pictures to prove that case. CCTV's Adel Mahroui has more.
Video footage, the Egyptian army says, is clear evidence that Hamas has a hand in recent militant attacks. Hamas governs the Gaza Strip. This video purportedly shows Palestinians detained on suspicion of planning attacks over the Egyptian border in Sinai. It also shows confiscated missiles with tags allegedly belonging to a Gaza-based group.
There are terrorist groups here and fundamentalists working with their counterparts in Gaza to conduct attacks in Sinai, targeting security forces, claiming they are infidels. The borders are the responsibility of all the countries involved. We believe that Hamas should exert more effort to protect the Egyptian people.
Hamas has dismissed the claims. Some analysts say it would never admit to involvement.
Even if some of its members were arrested, it would say they operated alone. Hamas can't afford to lose Egypt under the Israeli siege. It's the only bridge to the outside world. But no one can deny that there is compassion with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Tensions between Hamas and Egypt have been rising since the ousting of President Mohamed Morsi in July. Hamas is an offshoot of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood movement, and Morsi had provided a ready home for Hamas to hold press conferences. Since Morsi's ousting, Hamas has been caught up in Egypt's crackdown on Islamists and its military offensive against militants in Sinai. That included sealing many of the tunnels linking Egypt to the Gaza Strip.
Destroying the tunnels will help Egypt a lot, but it also ends supplying Hamas, not just with weapons, but food, medicine, and many other essentials.
Egypt's army said that it destroyed 90% of the tunnels dug under the borders with Gaza, a step to terminate any interference from the besieged strip, and it's a dear price for Hamas to pay. Adel Mahroui, CCTV, Cairo.
While crocodiles are incredibly strong, agile and aggressive, they are also merciless killers. It is estimated that they kill up to 200 people each year in Africa and can eat up to half their body weight in one meal. In Burkina Faso, the lakeside Bazule village is now world famous for its unique tradition involving these creatures.
Crocodiles are feared and avoided by humans and animals alike. However, in a tiny village in Burkina Faso, the Bazule villagers have lived harmoniously with about 200 wild crocodiles for many generations. The people of this village revere these sacred crocodiles in the lake. Head crocodile guide Prosper Kabore is a key figure in the community. He was born into this tradition, and it is his job to safeguard this unique relationship between the villagers and the sacred reptiles.
Les crocodiles de Bazule sont sacrés parce que c'est le totem du village. Le totem, ça veut dire que c'est les ancêtres du village. C'est les ancêtres du village parce qu'ils ont sauvé les villageois, donc c'est ça qu'ils sont sacrés.
As the head crocodile guide, it is Prosper's duty to ensure he hands down the legend to the next generation while educating both the locals and tourists about the importance of these crocodiles. This unique tradition started many generations ago at a time when the people of Bazule were facing a great drought and there was no water.
Ils ont trouvé l'eau, il y a une femme qui était à la recherche du bois et elle est passée dans les nids de crocodiles et elle a vu que dans les nids de crocodiles il y a de l'eau. Elle est revenue sur le chef, informer le chef. Le chef a dit donner l'autorisation à toute femme qui a besoin d'eau, il n'a qu'à aller dans les nids de crocodiles pour puiser. Et à partir de ce jour, les femmes partent là-bas pour enlever l'eau et les crocodiles ne leur font pas de mal. Et comme ça, les gens ont dit comme c'est ainsi, les crocodiles sauvaient les villageois.
Visitors get to touch, pet or even sit on the backs of these ferocious creatures, while the crocodiles patiently accept this interaction.
Le plaisir quand les touristes touchent les crocodiles et même monter là-dessus. Mais immédiatement, quand il arrive ici, on laissait qu'il monte et qu'il puisse s'asseoir. Donc quand il arrive, ça lui ferait plaisir de s'asseoir, de les toucher, et même de les caresser.
The sacred crocodiles and the Bazule people have a great common interdependency. The crocodiles allow the villagers to use the water, and the villagers allow the crocodiles to feed on their plants, and the cycle of life goes on harmoniously. The money obtained from tourists goes directly to help the needy children in Bazule. Therefore, not only does the community help in conserving these crocodiles, but also the old tradition, and it also uplifts the lives of its community members.
All right, let's now take a quick look at Africa's business this hour with Penina Karibe. Penina.
Thank you, Beatrice. And coming up on Biz Africa tonight.